Hello, this is Scott, and it is August 30th, 2015, and this week's video we're going to talk about some stocks. Now, on my screen you can see here, this is a slide that I used in my webinar that I did on June 28th, 2015 with my good friend Rob Booker, and we talked about the three systems that I presented in my course, which I released in June. What was interesting about that night is we talked about a bunch of stocks that were setting up according to the rules of one of the systems in the course. And I thought it'd be interesting, now it's almost exactly 2 months later, to go back and take a look at what would have happened had you followed the rules of the systems I talked about. What would have happened if you actually traded these real time? So let's take a look. I will start with the short trades, and I'll actually take a quick look at all of them. So the first one we talked about that night, back on June 28th, was Apple. So let's slide over to my chart. On my screen, and we'll go quickly through these trades. I don't want to bore you. Don't want to bore me either. But the gray line that you maybe can see here is June 28th. So anything that happened to the right, anything that happened after June 28th is what we'll be talking about. And here's Apple, and it's a daily chart. This is the Bollinger Band, which we talk about in the course. That's the midpoint of the Bollinger Band, which is also the 800 period simple moving average. Anyway, at the time I recommended Apple, I said Apple was a short because it had met the requirements, which the first requirement is being near the Bollinger Band or above the Bollinger Band. It had just touched. Then we were going to set up a trade based on recent support and resistance, and we go for a nice small profit target so our win rate is high. So as you can see on the screen, this was the night of the video in the gray line. The very next day, had you set up the trade that night, you would have entered the trade, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, about 6 days later, you would have reached our profit target. It would have been for $1.91 or 1.5%. And then price went back up again, and you got another trade in recent support and resistance. Got in and got yourself, actually it came up here. Excuse me, this is where our support and resistance is. I didn't draw the lines, that's why I got confused with my own trade. How do you get confused on your own trade? Well, you can if you have the wrong lines. This would have been the entry point. You got in, and then the very next day you would have made it. And I did the math for you, even though I didn't draw the lines on my own stupid chart. I mean, my own chart. It's 1.8%. So you would have had a trade for 1.5% and 1.8% on Apple. What was next? ABC. Let's go to ABC real quick. ABC was also a short trade, and I'll widen out the screen. This was the night of the webinar. We had a short entry all planned for below that line. Nothing happened. It went immediately away. Went up, got extreme again. Didn't set up a new support and resistance line, so we would have waited. And it got it all in one day for 1.5%. So that was a winner. Next on the list, ADI. Once again, the gray line, it's set up the very next day. We would have had a support and resistance line above the Bollinger Band. Would have entered and exited within 2 days for 1.9%. We're doing well, aren't we? Let's do another. Amazon. Oh, Amazon was a good one, if memory serves. All sorts of lines on here. Let's take a look. Here's the gray line, right? Next day would have set up what would have been our entry point. Price rose, came down, took our trade, and then immediately stopped us out. Would have lost $18. It's an expensive stock. Would have lost $18 or 4.2%. Then it rose and rose and rose, and I don't know if you've been aware, but the market's crashed lately. But we would have had a trade. It was extreme, above the Bollinger Band. We would have set up our trade up here, below this support and resistance line here, and we would have entered and been up in that trade. As you can see, when that day closed, we hadn't reached our profit target yet, but we would have closed in profit. Very next day, it opened way down in our direction short, which was at 463.60. So if you had actually taken this trade real time, you would have gotten in here, and that would have been the end of the trade, but you wouldn't have been out yet, and then it would have gapped open, and you would have been out there if you set your orders. If you did it manually, you might have gotten a different price somewhere in there. At any rate, you would have made $43 or 8.6% back. Pretty good. Oops, we'll get to that. Oops, we'll get to that, don't worry. UA. Not that you were worried, because you weren't worried. UA, which is Under Armour. Here's the night of the webinar. Price rose, we never got any entries. Got our little support and resistance line here, and on this day we would have entered, went away from us, but would not have stopped out, and then it would have entered and then opened right at our target and gone even further for 2.2%. And the last short we talked about that night was Target, TGT. Night of the webinar, support and resistance entry line there, broke through and got it all in one day, 1.3%. Let's keep going. let's talk about the longs. Abercrombie, as I said in the webinar, had already taken. It was just an example, but let's talk about APA. Now we're looking at some long trades that we talked about in the webinar. Night of the webinar, price fell, support and resistance line, price entered, made it 2 days later, $1.65, 3.4% winner. Next up was sensing a pattern, by the way. ATW comes next. ATW on the screen, that's when we talked about it, and we haven't gotten a trade on ATW. If you're curious to set this up, we'd set this up right above support and resistance right here, and we'd go for a nice modest profit target, but that would be our entry, and that's something that we'll be waiting on. But no trade on ATW since the webinar. I keep clicking on that slide. I don't know why I keep doing that. This was Brooklyn. I don't even know what this is. BKLYN. This was, I think, a mistake on my part. Let's be honest. Here's the webinar. Here's our entry point. We're only going for 5 cents. This is a very, very slow moving stock. And although it met all the requirements, it's an ARCX stock, and it just doesn't move. In real life, we wouldn't ever take a trade that's only going to give us 5 cents or 0.2%. However, it was on the list, and it was a winner, if you call 0.2% a winner. But it did enter, and then it reached our target. So hooray for BLCN. CCJ was the other one we talked about on that fateful night of the webinar. Webinar night, nothing happened, price dropped, gave us a new entry point, entered here, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 days later made it for 2.8%. Last but not least, SWN, been waiting for this trade ever since the webinar, and nothing's happened. You can see price has not gotten over our support or resistance line, right, which is resistance obviously here. So what does all that mean? Let's go to the spreadsheet. Well, here's a listing of all the trades that we just talked about. It says since webinar on June 28th, 2015, the way I set it up is this. I want to be able to get all these stocks. So what I would recommend is maybe having 2 stock accounts, which gives you a chance to take as many trades as possible. Now, obviously, that dilutes your returns, right? If you make 10% on half of your account, obviously that's only 5% overall, right? So if you take it all in one account and use your entire account size, you do make more trades. But the problem is, for example, Apple, you get in June 29th, you're not out till June 8th. If you only trade one account, you're stuck in Apple, which is fine, it was a winner, but you're stuck in Apple, you can't take any other trades, right? So that's a problem. There's one that was extra long, CCJ, for example, July 31st to August 10th. So if you only use one account to trade these stocks, or trade stocks period, you're going to be stuck in CCJ. And then UA was a pretty long one too, right? August 7th to August 21st. That would have taken a while, even though it was a winner. So that's why for this particular talk, this particular experiment, this particular results rundown, whatever you want to call it, I divided up into 2 accounts. And here's how it would have gone chronologically. On account 1, we would have taken Apple, and we would have made not 1.5% overall, but we would have made half that because we divided our money in half. You follow me? I hope that's clear. I tried explaining it to Jill, my trading partner, and she didn't get it at first. Not because she's stupid, but because I'm bad at explaining. So hopefully you can get that. But overall, our overall account would have gone up 0.75% off of that trade. But you can see ADI set up on exactly the same day. So if you're only trading one account, which one do you choose? Well, I would choose the one that gives you the biggest win. But if you have 2 accounts, you can almost take them all. So I did that. And in ADI, I took it, and it was over the same day, and you made 0.95%. Then Target, this account was free to take Target. You can see 24th is after the 8th, so we had plenty of time to take it, right? We had 16 days or whatever. That made 0.65% overall. Well, we had time over here to take Amazon, which the first one, as if you remember, was a loser. However, oh, that's too bad. But we still had time. We were out the 24th, so we were ready for ABC. We made that for 0.75. We saw that. CCJ, we were out on July 13th, so we were obviously ready to take this on July 31st, and CCJ was a winner. Back up here, ABC, we were out by the 24th, so we took that for a winner. APA, now this one was tricky. You would have had to be at your charts because CCJ closed and Apache opened on the same day. I hope it's Apache, it's what I'm calling it. We're going to call it APA or ABBA. But you would have had to arrange that on the same day. Is that hard to do? Not really. It's only a couple stocks, right? And you could have used a limit order and gotten it at any price. So I assume that we were able to get that. I don't think that would have been that hard. They are daily charts. So we'll assume we got that. We could always take that out if you don't like that in my data numbers. But anyway, let's assume we took it at whatever price. We made approximately 1.7% overall. However, we were out August 12th, so this account was free to take the second trade on Amazon, the one we liked, and we made a big winner on that, 4.3. Meanwhile, Under Armour, we're in August 7th. We were in it for a while, but we were able to because we were out on July 30th, so we were free to take that one, and 1.1%. Hopefully, that's not too confusing. This number, I don't know why I put that at the top. I've always done that with my spreadsheet, so I apologize for that. But all that does is add those up. So overall, in account number 1, we would have made 3.25% overall. In account number 2, as you can see, added up all those numbers, 6.25%. You add those two up, as you can see, that plus that, and you get 9.5%. What does that mean? That's 9.5% almost in exactly 2 months. That's just about 5% a month, which is just about 60% a year. At any rate, it's over 50% a year. All you'd have to do to get those returns is divide up into 2 accounts and to listen to the webinar and see what the stock picks that we talked about. So that is my report on how the webinar stock picks turned out. Love to hear your comments. If you're interested in stocks at all, I'd love to talk more about stocks. But if you're not interested, then I'll just do it quietly in a darkened room somewhere by myself. Email me if you have any questions, scottwelsh@gmail.com, only one T, and we will talk to you again